there's one clip. You just have to kind of pull. I pulled like this, not down. I was pulling down, or like this. I didn't do it. I pulled like this. What about this side? Harder, 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 harder. Don't want to break it. I just pulled hard like this. There's the clip. Hope I can put it back together again. Okay. Okay, so it clips into that thing, and that is there a clip down there? There's a clip right there. Okay, so I had this panel off. I was able to remove the plastic around the steering column. I might have broken off a bit of the plastic, but we will see how it gets put back together. This is how it looks. So next up, I'm going to take off the electrical side of the ignition switch, two little Phillips head screws, and trace the connectors and see how to rewire it. Next, I'm going to remove this metal bracket because it's in the way of all these wires around here. It's two 10 millimeter bolts, one here and one on the other side. Here is one of the 10 millimeter bolts, and a little thing goes in here. And on this side, right up there. Yep. Here is the electrical side of the ignition switch with the wire harnesses. Going through the zip tie. This is the 7P connector because it has 7 pins, and this is the 5P connector. It's also brown. Right there, 5 pin. So we're going to undo those by, there's a little thing you push up here and then you pull the connector out. And then we'll do the same thing for this, which I think that you push it in from the bottom. And then we'll have to remove wires from this and put it on the new apparatus. Correction. You push in from the top of the 5P connector. I have removed both connectors, as you can see. And there's a little zip tie you have to remove. This one right here. And taking out these two screws, you can take this out. But there's also like a ground screw, this guy on the top here. And there's a screw to undo that. I don't know what that's for. We will find out. Oh, and here's another zip tie. So, this zip tie, and also the one in here. So, I have removed all the zip ties and the two pieces of yellow tape. One was down here, and one was right here. So, if you observe, all three are free now. And what we're going to have to do is this connector is fine, but all the little wires coming from this harness right here into this connector, we're gonna have to remove these. We're going to have to remove these wires from this connector and put it on the new connector. And somehow, so this wire right here goes to some ground or something, and there's also this connector as well, and so I think that has to do with the small wire harness. So we don't have to disconnect those, we just have to disconnect it from this end. So we will remove this and feed it through this metal hole and somehow get this done. So as you may have guessed, this is a little bit big to go through here, so I'm pulling this way. And so, I'm just gonna pull it through and hope the rectangular things can go through the connectors. They're pretty tough. I don't think I can break it unless I pull too hard. But it doesn't really want to go. Okay, with some wiggling, maneuvering the other little ribbed wire harness in there out of the way, we got it all out. This is the old one. So, this remaining wire harness is for the small wires, as I call it, small gauge wires, instead of the thicker wires, as you can see. And so, it's as I thought, was for this ground connector. I believe it's ground. And the other one up here. So we don't have to mess with that. Now we have to remove this wire harness, the wires from it, from this connector, and then get the new wire harness and put it in its connector. And so how will we poke out these wires carefully? There's a pin removal tool according to the PDF. I'm going to try a paper clip, see what happens. So the PDF says to first remove the wire lock, I think that's what they call it, this white thing inside of this connector. I'm not quite sure how to do that. And then you remove all these small wires. It goes into detail of which ones and how pin 2 and pin 4 have the same colored wires, so don't get them mixed up. Put a piece of tape around one of them so you know which wire is which. And then you remove all of this, you know, throw it away or keep it as an old backup. And then get the new one and then with the new connector and put all the small wires into the new connector and reinstall the lock. So the question is how to remove the lock. I tried pulling on it with needle nose pliers. I'm not sure. The other method possibly, you know, can be reliable. Just snip the wires at some point, and then so then you still have this connector. You get the new harness, the new ignition switch, harness eye, whatever you want to call it, and then use butt connectors to connect the wires reliably, and then use some electrical tape to reinforce it. That also can be reliable, but that's not according to the official recall instructions. So I'm going to try it legitimately first to see how to remove this white lock. So what I ended up doing is, instead of attempting to remove this white lock, see if I can get a good shot of it. Instead of trying to do that and then removing the 5 small wires from this connector and then installing the little wires onto the new harness, I just cut the wires here for the old ignition switch and then butt connected in the new ignition switch, which includes this thing and the 5P connector. That's all a part of the new ignition switch part of the harness. This 7P connector is recycled. Nothing has been removed or put into this connector. I just used 2 butt connectors. The black with white stripe wire is the smaller of the two. That's 10 gauge. The solid white wire is 8 gauge. I don't think it's 6 gauge, it's 8 gauge. But it is bigger than 10 gauge. So it's 8 gauge most likely, pretty sure. The black one with white stripes is 10 gauge. 10 gauge, 8 gauge. Park Rose Hardware butt connectors. And now we will put it back together, try to thread it through this black hole, connect it up, and this new OEM ignition switch comes with the little brown zip tie that goes in here through this hole. Try to make it nice and neat like that. And then it rests up against here. I might use a zip tie there, and a zip tie around the ignition switch frame as it was in the first place before I started, and we'll go from there. Keep in mind when you thread this harness through this hole that you leave a little bit of slack so that you can put this ignition switch flush in here with no gap. You notice there's no gap. So leave some slack and then gently screw one side. My advice is just screw one side in partially, then the other, and then tighten them like one turn at a time so that there is an even application. Here I have the wires all put back together through this wire hole. There's a zip tie here, just to tighten things up a little. It's kind of looped around these wires. It's not too tight, just a little tight. The ignition switch kit came with a new brown zip tie that goes through the hole in here. And right now it's loose. I'll tighten it a bit more. I have zip tie around the steering column, the outer metal of the steering column, to tighten these wires up. This is where my butt connectors are. Electrical tape. And next I will install this metal bracket again, and then this plastic cover. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Okay, I have the cover installed again. It's not tightened down yet, but it just snapped back in place on both sides, no problem. Should be a little bit easier to take apart the next time around because it's, well, been taken apart once since it's been made back in 1998, late 1998. So I hope this video was helpful. Feel free to leave comments to ask questions or review the video. Thank you.